Well, good morning, everybody. I'm glad that you could join us. There has been a lot of information floating around our chamber email box and phone voicemail has been full of people with questions. We've been on other podcasts, and there's a lot of things that have come up through those discussions. And so we went right to the experts, which are Greg Lewis, and we have a young lady here from Department of Labor who will be able to answer hopefully all of your questions with complete 100% accuracy. They have the ability to see into the future and read the minds of all of our legislators.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, I'm with you.
Okay, well, I wish the two of you luck in your presentation, and hopefully no one will ask you a question that you aren't going to be able to handle. I'm sure. I am very confident of that. So I'll turn it over to Greg if you want to start and go through what's available for small businesses.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Diane. We really appreciate the Chamber's partnership on this. The first screen you're looking at is contact information for me. So feel free to take a screenshot or write that down. You'll see that it includes my cell number, and feel free to call it if you end up with questions beyond this, or if you'd like to become an SBDC client. I'll quickly explain what the SBDC is. It's the Small Business Development Center. We are, our presence in this state is paid for jointly by the Federal Small Business Administration and Connecticut's Department of Economic and Community Development. So they split my salary 50-50, and as a consequence of that, our services are available to you at no cost. Now, I actually do cover the area pretty much from Mansfield down to New London, and I have 13 colleagues around the state who do exactly what I do, which is try to help you, particularly in this crisis situation. So again, there's my contact information, and we're now going to go over to the SBDC website. Okay, and I'm going to walk you through the website, which has pretty much everything you're going to need to know. Please make a note of I'll back up one. Let's go to our homepage so you see where we are. It's ctsbdc.com, Connecticut Small Business Development Center.com. And you see we have one button that's devoted to COVID-19 Business Resource Center. Just click on that, and you're going to have access to pretty much everything you're going to need for the next probably several months, to be perfectly honest with you. And let me lead you through this for now. You see, we'll start with, this stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. That's the first available loan to you, and I encourage you to apply for that. This is where you find that $10,000 grant. The application for this has been changed. Even if you applied when this first came out a few weeks ago, you should reapply if you haven't already. Reapply so that you'll be applying for the $10,000. Ultimately, it's a grant. It's up to $10,000 grant. The Paycheck Protection Program, applications for that will be available tomorrow. That program is the details are being fine-tuned, so that'll be up and running tomorrow. I've talked to several bankers. They're not quite ready to go with this, but they're getting there. And this will be done primarily through banks and other lending institutions. I'll mention quickly the Shared Work Program, which Terry can talk more about because I don't really know that much about it, but Terry should have a pretty good handle on that, and we'll come back to that. But just to give you a sense of what's on our site before I dig into the particulars of the loan programs, if you want updates, Small Business Administration updates, you'll find them right here. And this one is from yesterday. It talks about mobilization efforts. And again, it has specific information about how to apply the loan terms, and et cetera, et cetera. Here we have federal resources for the CARES Act, Emergency EIDL loan, that's a grant that's mentioned here, that's $10,000. Paycheck protection, SBA debt relief for certain loan programs. The 7A program is still in existence. If you have an existing 7A loan, you're entitled to some amount of relief, and it's up to 7 months, excuse me, up to 6 months. If there are employee retention credits, This is new, this is complicated, this is something that we will dig into later. As you know, I think it's June 1st, you're going to have certain obligations relative to employees. And to help offset that, there are going to be tax credits available to you. And we'll talk about that later because I don't know all the details yet because, again, the details are still being worked out. And then there's a delay of employer payroll taxes. Again, this is moderately complicated, and I don't want to go into this now, but you need to be aware that that exists. Okay, there are SBA loan programs, IRS tax filing extensions, medical leave tax credits. That's if your employees have to go out on COVID-19 related illness, you're entitled to tax credits for that. CDC business guidelines, you can find those here, as well as OSHA guidelines. And then we have Connecticut resources. The Connecticut Mortgage Payment Relief Plan. I believe Governor Lamont set that in motion recently back on the, well, as of the 31st, we have information about that. Connecticut extends the sales and room occupancy tax deadline, tax filing deadlines, Department of Labor unemployment information. And again, Terry can talk about that in more detail. Okay, bridge loan programs, tri-state measures, that's Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. And there are also utilities and telecom relief. So again, pretty much everything you're going to need to know over the coming months, you'll be able to find on this site. So I encourage you to either bookmark it now, or if you're using a mobile device, make sure to keep this tab open so that you can find this. And again, I assume that you're not going to remember much of what I say, but as long as you know where you can find the information, this will make your lives much, much simpler. And again, you can find pretty much everything you need right here. So let's take a dive into the loan programs. We have a resource guide which you can in fact print out. If you're obsessive compulsive, feel free to do that because it's a lot of information. But this is a summary of what you need to know. So let's start digging in. Okay. See, these circumstances are relatively unprecedented. If you're familiar with the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, which is a misnomer, but we'll go with that name, I encourage you to read about it because it'll give you a pretty good sense of what we're in for. If you're a business owner, you need to be prepared for the worst. Let's hope that we don't get there. Let's hope that things end up going smoothly. But if you're not familiar with how bad things can get, again, I encourage you strongly to read about what happened in 1918 because, in fact, we have been through this before. Okay, it's Connecticut Resource Guide. You can click here, get again all kinds of information. Now, this is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. We'll start with this. It's low interest, meaning 3.75%. It's a working capital loan for small businesses. You're going to see this multiple times, and I want to emphasize this. I know that there have been people who said that you have to apply either for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan or for the Paycheck Protection Program. That is not true. You can apply for both. You cannot, however, apply for funds to cover the same expenses from both programs. You have to cover one set of expenses in one program and another set of expenses in the other. And we can talk about how that. I will go into some of the differences shortly as we make our way through this resource guide. Please note this. I've had instances where clients have had credit scores below 560. You can upload an explanation. You can also, if you were turned down because of your credit score, you can reapply. And you should reapply if you did so, again, before the $10,000 credit was emphasized. You should reapply. You can explain why your credit score is what it is if it's below 560. And typically, if there was a divorce, let's say there were health issues or something, you had high medical bills, something came up that was totally unexpected and it drove down your credit score, you have that available to you. That's an option that you can turn to. Okay, now, so who's eligible? Small businesses, sole proprietors, independent contractors, cooperatives. Now, if you're part of an employee ownership stock plan or ESOP, that you're not eligible, as are small agriculture businesses are not eligible, and what are called private nonprofits. I'm sorry, that's not true. Private nonprofits are eligible. As agriculture businesses are eligible. Part of an employee ownership plan, you're not eligible. This is a little confusing. If you're part of a public nonprofit, you are not eligible. Private nonprofits are eligible. So the only one here that isn't is this one, part of an employee's ownership stock plan. 500 or fewer employees. There are exceptions to this. If you're a manufacturer, in certain manufacturing industries, you can have more than 500 employees. We can address that on an individual basis because, again, it depends on the type of manufacturer you are. So you can see this flow chart. At 500 or fewer employees, continue, affected by COVID-19, continue, acceptable credit history. You have to think of this as a loan. So all the things you would normally encounter with any lender are going to be at issue here. So their concern is you need to be able to pay this back. Now, there are all kinds of ways to demonstrate that you can pay it back. And it may be that your revenues aren't sufficient, but you have an investor who's stepped up. You have a spouse who's willing to make their income available to you, that the spouse is willing to be a guarantor on a loan. Or again, an investor is willing to be a guarantor. You just need to be able to demonstrate that the loan can be paid back because, again, it is a loan. Ineligible entities, agricultural businesses, primary activity is defined in section 18B. And if this applies to you, feel free to get in touch with me and we can dig into that to deal with your eligibility. Religious organizations are not eligible. Gambling concerns when more than a third of your annual gross revenue comes from gambling. You're not eligible. Casinos and racetracks aren't eligible. And this is because for cannabis industry is not eligible because for federal purposes, it's still considered a class 1 drug. States have individually decriminalized or made legal cannabis. However, on the federal level, it is not legal. And the SBA has to go by federal law. So if you're selling something related to cannabis, you're not eligible for these funds. Can I ask if there are any questions so far? I don't want to go through all this and people are chomping at the bit to ask something.
Greg, the only question that I see is, are landlords eligible for this loan?
If you have rental properties and that's part of your business, yes, you would be eligible.
Okay. And
not commercial real estate entities as such are not eligible, but if you have rental properties, yes, you're eligible.
Okay. Is CBD considered cannabis?
Yes, it is.
So they're not included?
They are not included. For federal purposes, they are not included.
Okay. Someone asked if they've already applied, do we really have to apply again?
If you
want to
want to
explain why.
Yeah, if you want to get that $10,000, they're calling it a grant, but if you want access to that, if you applied before, I think it was last Friday or Saturday, if you applied before then, the $10,000 wasn't mentioned. There's a checkbox now in the application that was, again, changed over the weekend. If you applied before the application was changed, then you have to reapply in order to get the $10,000. And the $10,000 is available to you whether or not your application is approved. So I encourage you to apply for that.
And so just to clarify on that, if you applied before Monday and you do not have already a loan officer that you've spoken to about the loan that you applied for, you should reapply. If you have a loan officer, you should contact them and see how they want to go about it.
Exactly.
But the big difference is before Monday, you couldn't clarify that you wanted specifically the $10,000 advance, which is basically the grant part of this that does not have to be repaid.
Right. I think it may have been that the online application may have been changed as early as Saturday or Sunday. If you were on then and the $10,000 was mentioned and it was only a 2-page application and they didn't ask you to upload anything, then you do not need to reapply because that is a new application.
Okay. So someone was asking if you have two different businesses, you can apply for each business. That's correct. It's the business that's applying, not the person.
It's the business that's applying. In fact, for instance, let's say you own a building and you run your business out of the building, and the business is held by the building is owned by a separate entity other than the underlying business. Those are two separate entities, and you're entitled to apply for relief for the two entities,
Okay.
which is very common.
So just to clarify on this about nonprofits, all nonprofits that are not public nonprofits are eligible for this, correct?
All right, no, we're getting to that. There's certain private nonprofits that are still not eligible, and we'll get to that.
Okay.
All right. So economic injury, step one is understand the loan. It's up to $2 million. Again, we're talking about the economic injury disaster loan, SBA economic injury disaster loan, up to $2 million. The interest rate is 3.75% for small businesses and 2.75% for nonprofits. The term is up to 70 years, and there's no collateral required. I believe that's a change. And another update is loans under $200,000 do not require a personal guarantee. That's another significant change. So just be aware of that. If it's over 200,000, yes, a personal guarantee is still required. The money again is for working capital. So you can pay fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, et cetera, et cetera. Now this is an important distinction, and this is a distinction between the EIDL and the PPP, where it says you can pay fixed debts, your mortgage, for instance, your rent. You can cover mortgage expenses with the EIDL. With the payroll protection program, you could cover the interest on a mortgage, but not the mortgage itself, not the underlying principal. That's an important distinction. You can cover underlying principal with the EIDL. You can cover interest with the PPP. So please keep that in mind. So, and again, other underlying debts. If you have other sort of long-term debts that you've been paying, that you pay toward as a normal function of your working capital expenses every month, you're paying off short-term interest debts. Let's say you borrowed money at 30% from your credit card because you were desperate. You can cover that, but you're paying that off regularly. That's something that you can cover with the EIDL. Not necessarily so with the PPP. Okay, they're not intended to replace lost sales or profits, it's certainly not for expansion. Okay, and cannot be used to pay down long-term debt. With the exception, again, if you're covering a mortgage, obviously mortgage is long-term debt, you can cover mortgage principal if it's, again, part of your normal working capital expenditures. And then how do you apply for the loan? You can come to our website and just click on the link. It's pretty simple. Or you can go directly to that link. Now, I want to give you an alert. Essentially, what's happening now when you apply, particularly if you apply for the 10,000, if you're really only there for the 10,000, and that's fine, you're welcome to do that. But the loan above that, you will have to, if a loan officer gets in touch with you, you will need to provide documentation, and they'll tell you how to do that. You will upload pretty much the normal things you'd expect to upload with any loan request. Tax returns, a current year profit and loss statement, balance sheet, all the things you would normally encounter on any loan situation. So just be prepared for that. So pull those together if you haven't already, because you'll need them for both the EIDL and the PPP.
Greg, while we're here, can I ask a question?
Sure.
What's considered long-term debt?
Normally, well, for accounting purposes, anything over 1 year is considered long-term. Short-term is anything is 1 year or less. That's the typical accounting definition.
Okay.
All right. Okay, processing and decisions. They're saying 3 to 4 weeks. That's a goal, and we'll leave that as a goal. I wouldn't necessarily count on that, but that's the goal. And closing normally is 5 to 7 days. I have heard there have been some loans closed, or people are now in the closing, going through closing documents. So things are moving, and it has been about 3 weeks. So my fingers are crossed that continues to be the case. We can't count on that, but we'll certainly hope that it continues. Okay, now the grant, the $10,000 grant. It's an emergency advance on the EIDL. It's not taxable. It is, you can get it even if you don't get approved for a loan. And as you can see, it's meant to be used for paid leave, maintaining payroll, increased costs due to supply chain disruption, mortgage or lease payments, and repaying obligations that cannot be met due to revenue losses. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't need to be repaid, and the eligibility requirements are the same ones that I mentioned above. Again, if you hadn't applied, you still can, so please do. Grants are backdated to January 31st. So again, if you applied right away, you can still go back and reapply, and it'll again cover that whole period. Now it's saying, up to now, it's saying that the grant process is available. You can do this up through December 31st. I wouldn't wait that long. If you are interested in doing that, I would encourage you to apply as soon as possible. Okay, you apply for the loan, request the cash advance. That's one of the last boxes on the application process. I think it's on page 3. Okay, this is an issue. There's some confusion about this, and I am not going to give you a definitive answer to this because I don't have one. Originally, it said that you would, because you upload your bank account number and the routing number, the implication was that this money would go into your checking or savings account, whichever you designated, within 2 to 3 days after you submitted your application. That apparently has not been the case. So it appears that after they go through the loan process, which can take the 3 to 4 weeks, it would be 2 to 3 days after that's completed. But again, that is not definitive. I have requested more information on that. So for right now, the 2 to 3 days after you submit the application does not seem to be true. Diane will know at the same time I know. As soon as I find out what the real situation is, Diane will know. So she can share that information with you. Okay, some tips. These are all the forms that you will need to file as part. Ultimately, if you want to apply for the loan, the EIDL loan, this is all the paperwork you'll need. And I'm not going to go through all that now, but just be aware that there are a lot of forms. Most of these are just check off boxes, but just be aware that there's a lot involved. It's pretty much the same things that you would encounter if you were applying for a loan. Some tips here. Sort of best practices you can expect to do this sort of thing. Here it says apply online versus by mail. Now this is a little bit confusing. You do need to apply online. It used to be required that you had to download everything and then send it in by mail. That isn't the case anymore. Although I believe you can mail it in. If you don't have access to ready access to a computer, you can mail it in. Okay. Again, note this.
I was going to say, I have another question for you.
Sure.
Before we go on, okay?
Yep.
So a couple of things. We've gone through this on a couple of other businesses that you and I have worked with. The nonprofits that apply, one of the first questions they asked is, are you owned by a business entity? And so if they're not owned by a business entity, they're standalone nonprofit, they would say no. Then the next bunch of questions that come up asks you about who the quote unquote owner is, or you need to put a certain person's name in there with their social security number and other information. That is required. and it can be anyone from the organization,
It
correct?
should
Do
be
you have any-
it should be someone with signing authority, obviously.
Mhm.
So,
So it
yeah,
could be the president, CEO, COO, executive director, someone like that.
right. The nonprofit has to determine who has signing authority for something like this. Normally, it would probably be the same person who has the authority to sign checks.
Okay. And so there's really no personal financial obligation, especially for the $10,000 grant, but up to 200,000, there's no personal, so that executive director is not going to be personally responsible and have to give their personal information.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Okay. And you have, again, if you're denied, you have 6 months to reapply and submit a written request for reconsideration. Okay, this is, I don't want to take up too much of Terry's time. I want to let her, because I know you'll have a lot of questions about employees. So quickly, there is an express bridge loan that's up to $25,000. If you're interested in that, please contact me. We're going to skip that for now. I don't know if very many people apply for that, but that is available. So be aware, these are the terms: up to $25,000, 7-year term, 6.5% plus prime. Some people have applied for this, not very many. But if you are interested in this, please get in touch with me. Okay. You can apply for the disaster loan, the grant, and paycheck protection. You are not disqualified for applying for one because you've applied for the other. Please understand that you can apply for one, two, or all three, and including the bridge loan. All of those things are available to you. All right, here's a quick chart that shows some of the differences. Now, this is not all inclusive. There are lots and lots of details to this, but these are the basics, the things you need to understand. Okay, so again, payroll protection covers payroll expenses, health, and that includes payroll expenses. It's not just salary. It's your expenses related to health, covering health insurance, leave benefits, and so on. So it's pretty much all that you contribute or all that's paid in toward payroll. So don't just look at the salary. It's the salary plus benefits. Again, here you see mortgage interest, but not principal, rent and utilities, interest on debt incurred before February 15th. Okay, and the business's average, it's 2.5 times the business's average monthly payroll. That's what you're eligible for. It's at 0.5% interest. When this originally came out, it was 4%. It's now down to 0.5% interest, 0.5%. There are no payments at all for the first 6 months. It's repayable. The term is for 2 years, and it has a up to 100% forgiveness, which is why you have to weigh the two programs. It may be perfectly appropriate to lump a bunch of your expenses on the PPP because you could potentially get 100% forgiveness for that loan. The economic injury is up to $2 million, 3.75% interest, no payments for the first 12 months, and it has a 30-year term. And again, it has up to $10,000 in the form of a cash advance. So that's pretty much it. Any more questions around this part up to now?
Well, I have a couple of people asking questions.
Sure.
So just to clarify, payroll expenses includes everything, including unemployment taxes, Social Security payments, benefits, sick pay, all of that.
As I understand it, that is the case.
Okay. Someone else asked if Airbnbs qualify. And of course, if they're a business, correct, they would qualify.
Okay, so we're back to that original question from the landlord. If you're operating an Airbnb as a small business, you've registered as a business entity of some sort, it's pretty much the same thing. As I understand it, it's pretty much the same thing as being a landlord. I have not heard that you would be ineligible. Again, but it has to be treated like a business.
Okay, so just to
for instance, I have clients who have inns or bed and breakfasts. And oftentimes they offer their rooms on Airbnb. So, you know, it's a business for them. Again, it has to be a real business.
Okay. So again, just to clarify, when you fill out the EIDL loan, the economic injury loan, you're filling it out in the name of the business, you're giving them the EIN number. However, they do ask for a contact, someone, like you said, that has signing ability for the company. You have to give them your general information, including your Social Security. You're not personally responsible up to $200,000. After that, you will have personal responsibility for the loan, correct? Or
yeah, that is correct. You'll fill out a personal financial statement. They'll ask for tax return, you know, the whole 9 yards. And you'll do a personal guarantee. It's pretty typical, the same thing you'd expect from a bank.
okay, and that's for nonprofits, for-profits, anybody.
Again, as far as I know, yes. If it's over 200,000.
Okay. I think I got all the questions so far.
Okay. All right. I want to turn it over then. Let's see. I'll go back to, let's see, stop share. We'll go back to my contact information. And I want to turn it over to Terry because, again, I'm sure you've got tons of questions about employment.
And actually, Terry, before we go to you, I do have one more question, Greg. Did we get clarification as to when we start being able to use our expenses for the one-to-one match on the PPP? Do we have that date yet? Is it the date of origination like they originally said, or are we looking at some change on that?
Ask me the question again.
So when you get the PPP, when you get your money, when your loan closes, your 8 weeks of expenses that you can match one-on-one to the loan to have it forgiven starts the day that your grant loan is confirmed.
Right. That is, as I understand it, that is the case. Now, obviously, that is an issue if, let's say you have a restaurant and you're not going to although you plan to open, let's say on May 1st, let's say for whatever reason you can't. And it may be that the things are still shut down. I want to get clarification, and I don't have it yet, on how that will work. If you should delay, right now, I'd be inclined to delay the application until you're closer to being sure when you're going to open. But I'm not certain about that, and I need to get clarification. So this is one of those, we will give you an answer later because I don't have a definitive one now.
There are a couple of things that are concerns, so we want people to know them before they close. I mean, you could apply, but you don't want to close till you have these answers. So the way the forgiveness happens is, theoretically, you would either keep your employees during this period of time or bring your employees back from unemployment, right? So when you bring
encouraged. That's the whole point, yes.
Right, so when you bring them back or you keep them, basically their costs, that's why it's called the payroll, bill, their costs that you spend during the 8-week period after the loan is closed, during those 8 weeks, those payroll expenses are what is going to match the money that you borrowed. So if you borrow $20,000 and you have $20,000 in payroll costs, you basically get the loan covered 100% and you're good.
You could get the other costs as well. The utilities, that sort of thing. All those other costs can be matched as well. It's just that I believe it's 75% of the total cost need to be for payroll.
Correct.
But you could get the other 25% forgiven as well.
So the things you have to be cautious about, though, is, again, if you apply for this loan and you're approved, let's say April 20th, it starts on April 20th. When you close the loan April 20th, it's the next 8 weeks. So if you're not open because you're a business that's non-essential, you don't have payroll costs, or you don't certainly want to bring your employees back to a business that's closed and there's nothing for them to do. So you have to be careful that that window is really where your costs are, or you may end up not being able to match the full loan and actually owe money.
Right, and I need to get clarification on that, because as it stands now, that's the case. But I want to make sure, and we will get a definitive answer, because there may not really be one yet. These things are moving targets. I want to stress that. So just be aware that things change.
And the idea is to bring back the same number of jobs that you had
At least, yes.
coronavirus. And they are looking at full-time equivalents for that. So if you have 3 part-timers that add up to 1 full-timer, they're looking at full-time equivalents, not actual individual people,
It
correct?
is full-time equivalent. As I understand it, it is full-time equivalent, yes. And you need, there's a period that we're concerned about. I don't want to take up too much of Terry's time, but if you're in this situation, please call me, because if you're a seasonal employer, essentially what you're doing is you're going back to your payroll for the prior year. If you're seasonal, you have a choice. You can look at 12 weeks, 12 consecutive weeks, beginning either February 15th or March 1st of last year, for assessing what your average monthly expenses were. So you need to be aware of that. And again, if that's an issue for you, please contact me.
So one other thing that we weren't 100% clear on was, if you're a sole proprietor, self-employed person, can your quote unquote wages or your
Yes, they
draw
can.
from the company be included?
Yes, they can.
Okay, and all of your taxes and stuff around that can be included in the PPP. Correct?
Not income taxes.
I'm sorry, did I say that? I meant payroll taxes.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Payroll taxes. So if you're not on your company's regular payroll, but you do take a draw, that can be included.
It's the same. It's effectively the same thing as if you're a 1099. You have to make money somehow, and you'll have a tax return that shows that you have income from the business.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, so that goes for all self-employed small business owners.
Right. This is meant to cover everybody, pretty much.
Okay.
Hi, Diane.
Yep.
Before we jump forward, there's a number of questions being submitted through.
I know, I'm reading them all.
All right. I just want to make sure that, and also the chat, they're coming fast and furious. Just want to give you a heads up.
I know, I'm trying to get to as many as I can.
We should probably move on to Terry, because I know there are going to be questions about employees. So, and I can't answer them. So.
Yeah, so what we can certainly stay after Terry has her chance. If anybody has, a lot of these questions have been asked over and over again, and some of them we don't have answers for. So feel free to stay on after Terry has her chance to talk. But I would say one thing: if there's any question or you want to weigh out the 2 different programs, you should call Greg, sit down, have a private conversation. He'll go over your dollars, your company specifics, and be able to kind of guide you as to what's best. So Greg, you've helped out a lot of people I've sent you so far, and I think that if you're in doubt, they should go to you.
Please do.
Okay, Terry, you're on.
Hello, this is Terry from the Department of Labor. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. First of all, can I ask Greg a question I was listening the entire time, and didn't quite understand, in regards to these loans, if these employers are approved, can they use this money to pay their employees their regular salary when they were unemployed?
The whole idea is to bring them back. So going forward, they essentially return to work and they get paid. That's the idea.
Okay, so right. So I was just confirming that while they're unemployed and not being paid by the employer and being paid by the Department of Labor, that the employer is not going to retroactively pay them for the same weeks we paid them.
No, this is to bring them back to work.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that's great. Because there are some employers that are notifying us after the fact now that they've decided to pay their employees, and now we have to go back and try to receive the money that these claimants received from unemployment back to us. So, okay, so we're good. First of all, I want to give everybody the email for an employer to send in specific questions. I am the one that I'm trying to keep up with these emails, but if you have specific questions, a specific person with issues, you can email me and then I will get back to you, I'm hoping within 24 hours. But that email address is Merit Rating. It's MERITRATING at ct.gov. Okay. So I don't know if you want me to start just explaining what is going on right now, or if you want me just to jump in on questions employers have. It's up to you.
I think, why don't you give an overall presentation, and then I've got a whole bunch of questions I think Greg sent you. So if you want to just give an overall presentation, we can start with that.
Okay. So as of today, we have 142,000 plus applications pending to be processed through the Department of Labor for unemployment. Anyone that has filed after March 19th, 20th, that's the border right now, those applications have not been looked at yet. So it will be a while longer. We're looking at right now, if someone filed for unemployment this week, their application, we're looking at about a 4 to 5 week delay. That's all I can tell you right now. They're working as fast as they can. They're trying to process them, but it's a slow process because someone manually has to look at these claims and move them over, make sure these people didn't file for unemployment before. There's no stops on the system. So it does take a while, but we are working as fast as we can. In regards to any of the federal information that is out there that the governor has spoke about, the president has spoke about, we, the Department of Labor, are looking and trying to analyze the details of this pandemic relief. It is taking our legal section a long time to review this because things change. We think we're going one way, and then either the president or the federal government or the state government says something else. So before any information is out there on how to apply for extra $600 a week, self-employment, business owners, it's all up in the air. We will post it on our website as soon as we can. If you'd like our website, if you don't have our website, I can give you that as well. It's www.ctdol.state.ct.us. And on our homepage is a big red box that has frequently asked questions about the COVID-19. And that is updated daily. So I would advise anybody with questions in regards to especially the federal information to check that daily. In regards to shared work is for someone, the employer, can apply with at least minimum is 2 employees on this program. The shared work is, giving an example, you have 2 employees, they both work full-time for you. Now you only have enough for 1 employee. So instead of laying off one and keeping the second one employed full-time, you would cut back their hours by 50%. So one would do half and the other one would do half. And it would be up to you on how you want them to come in to do work. You would send the application in to the Department of Labor. That can be found on sharedworkct.com. It provides you with the application, the information, different scenarios, how it affects you. But basically, for a 50% reduction, the unemployment, we would pay 50% of whatever they're entitled to. So for an example, our maximum unemployment right now is $649 a week. If that person was eligible for $649 a week because they were totally unemployed, then we would pay 50% of that, or $324 a week. And then you, the employer, would pay 50% of their actual earnings as a payroll check. So they would receive half the amount for unemployment, whatever they were entitled to, and half of their salary through you. In regards to employers' liability, right now, unemployment is either billed or charged to employers. They are billed to what we call our reimbursable nonprofit employers, the employers that do not pay taxes on a quarterly basis. They only pay when an employee is actually approved for unemployment, and then they pay dollar for dollar. Taxable employers, those are the ones that pay taxes to us quarterly based on their current employees. And these charges, when someone files for unemployment, we use those charges to compute their next year's tax rate. So anything happening now will affect your 2021 tax rate. Now, that is still a question based on the president declaring disasters, emergencies, that we are also waiting on to see who and if the employers will still be liable as they would in normal situations. So I'm sorry, I really can't give you answers on that, but there is a hope that maybe employers or different types of employers or different scenarios may not be liable, but as of right now, I have to give worst case scenario. You will be liable and you will be billed. Sorry. So, is there any specific questions? Should I stop here?
I'll ask for people.
Or should I hang up now?
No, maybe. So, a couple of questions. First one, you answered was, at this point, if you are a business and you put people and you lay people off, your unemployment rates technically may go up next year until we hear otherwise. But the hope is that that will not happen. But at the moment, it will. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Second question. If you have employees that are working for you, and you are an essential business and you are open for business, and your employees do not want to come to business to work because they are afraid of catching a virus, can they quit and still collect unemployment insurance?
They can, this is an at-will state. So anytime an employer wants to let someone go or a claimant quits, that's fine. For unemployment purposes, they will have to have a hearing. And we would have to make a decision based on the reason why they quit. Did they try to resolve the situation with the employer? Did they try to work from home? Did they try to work in a secluded area? It's going to be a lot of questions. And then an actual decision would be made on based on why they had to leave the employer. Same with if the employee says, I really don't want to work now, but I don't want to quit. I want to come back when this is all done with. That's fine. But for unemployment purposes, someone has to be able and available for full-time work. So again, there will be a hearing and it's all on, each case has its own case, and they're going to basically investigate, was the job suitable for this individual? Did they exhaust all possibilities? Was there something else that the employer could have offered and they didn't ask, or they just didn't want to be there? So that, again, would have to have a hearing and then they make a decision on their eligibility.
Okay, next big question. A lot of people who hire minimum wage employees are already having issues with people quitting or wanting to go on unemployment or not wanting to come back to work because under the new bill, the extra $600 a week that they will receive is more than they make working for their boss. So they don't want to come back to work until those benefits are exhausted, which could be up to 10 months. What do you say to that?
Right. Well, what I've been telling employers, and this is already happening, some employers, such as landscapers, they've laid off these people for the winter, and they've tried to call them back within the last 2 weeks. And because this is out there, we have people that employers have written into me with a list of names, Social Security numbers, and stated we call these individuals back, and they are refusing because they want to collect the unemployment, the continuous unemployment plus the extra $600. When the employers submit this list, we put a stop into the system and a hearing is scheduled to find out why they didn't return. And again, we'll make a decision whether or not they had good cause to not return. If they did have good cause, they could be approved. If they didn't, because the job was outside working by themselves, they may be denied. But we would need to know that. So
Okay.
what we're doing is asking the employers to submit a list, names, social, to the first email that I gave you, and those will be looked into.
Okay, so that was part B of the question. If you have an employee that refuses to come back, they can tell you about it by sending a list of the employee name, social security number, and send it to your email address, which was pol.meritrating@ct.gov.
Correct.
Okay, so if I have an employee, as everyone knows, last night the governor came out with another executive order that gives a set of guidelines for safe working environment during the coronavirus. That's in our newsletter that went out this morning in case anybody would like to have that specifically. But if you're following those safe guidelines in your company and you're offering as many options to your employees as possible, like working remotely, protective equipment, extra disinfectant, etc., there really should be hopefully no reason for them not to come back. I'm hearing a lot from landscapers and restaurant owners. And if this unemployment benefit of the $600 goes throughout the spring and summer, I already have catering companies and seasonal food workers who are saying, I'm not coming back to work. So as long as you're saying that they can report these people and it will at least get to a hearing, I suppose it's some good news for them.
Okay.
The timeline for shared work applications, if you go to the actual application, there's a 30-day process. Is that expedited during this, or is it still 30 days for you to get for your approval to engage?
I was on a conference call yesterday. I know there are hundreds of applications. They are pulling people from different sections of the Department of Labor to assist on this. So I understand it is moving faster, but there is no timetable right now. And all I can say is that the employer should submit it as soon as they know. And as long as there's no delinquency in payments on anything, they should be approved, and it will be retroactive.
Okay. Someone else asked, how does the shared work program work when businesses are considered non-essential and they're closed? Does that mean that they can reopen?
No, this is just for employers that are open but they don't have the full-time work that they did back in the good times, and they're just reducing their employees' hours because of basically lack of work.
Okay. Someone else was asking questions about insurance, which isn't necessarily you, but I'll just throw that in. Again, part of the executive order last night was that all insurance companies from health insurance to auto and homeowners insurance, they are not supposed to terminate you during this crisis. There's more information, again, on our website, e-newsletter, or the governor's website. So you can find out specific information on that, but you're not supposed to be dropped from your insurance during this crisis. That was his order last night. Unemployment insurance, is it retro from the application date? So if I apply today, does it start from today? Or let's say I was laid off last Friday, but I couldn't get to it until today. Does it go to my last day of work?
If your last day of work was last Friday and you apply for unemployment anytime this week, it will be effective this past Sunday.
Okay, but
it's always effective on a Sunday of the week in which you file.
Okay, but it won't go back 3 weeks, for example. So you got to do it the week after you're laid off.
Right.
Okay. So seasonal workers, we talked about a little bit. That also, if they're not willing to come back, again, employers can put their name, social security number, and give them to you. But that's not really going to solve the problem of employers getting their employees back. Are you guys looking at discussing the whole $600 thing with anyone and seeing if we can come up with some kind of a different plan?
I have presented this issue because many employers have emailed me on this. And I presented it to our legal department, and they are working as diligently as they can on this issue because they know, especially now that it's getting warmer, it could be construction workers, landscapers, anything, park, working in the park, anything that's outside will be in the same predicament. So they know they need to look into this. And right now, all I can do is if you call someone back, and again, make sure when you call them back, you either speak to them directly, have sent them a registered letter saying, I need you back to work on April 3rd. And then April 3rd comes and they don't return, then you have an issue that they didn't return to work and they're refusing. Now, if you send them a text, and I understand that that's your communication with the individual and they always respond to your text, but this time you send them a text and they don't respond to you. And you're saying, well, I told them to return to work, but they didn't respond. They can turn around and say they never received it. Or an email, they never received it. And yes, it may be game playing by them, and we understand that. But we try to enforce the issue with the employer that to make an offer, you should actually speak to the individual either by phone, in person, or send them a registered letter. We need to have some proof that they were told they are to return to work on this date, and this is where they are to return. If that doesn't happen and they turn around and say, I never got the text, I never got the email, I never got a message left on my phone, it may be found that there was no actual offer made. So I'm just throwing that out there. I know it's sometimes difficult because you've always contacted the person by text or by telephone, and they see your number coming through and they're not going to answer it because they know what you're going to say. So that's why I'm just enforcing this.
Okay, a couple other questions. When will the $600 unemployment actually begin?
That's a very good question. We don't know.
Okay. There's not going to be any special process. I understand it's just going to happen, right? So no one will have to do a second unemployment application for it?
Not that I know of. but there will be information posted on the website if something is needed.
Okay. So quote unquote, real employees that were real employees that got W-2s can collect now, but 1099ers, sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed, they will be eligible for the $600. But right now, if they're applying, they're getting denied.
They
Yes?
will be denied because they don't pay taxes to the Department of Labor on their wages.
Yep.
So they're not eligible. That's for regular benefits. And as soon as they make decisions on unemployment or benefits for their self-employed business owners, that will be posted to our website.
Okay. So artists and other 1099ers who are self-employed or gig artists, people who do gigs, will be able to apply for this.
They can apply, yes.
Yep. The age that you start, so if you read the language, it says anyone really can apply for it, including people who have never been employed and students. So is there an age? So if you're over 16, you can apply, and at what top age? So if I've been retired for 20 years, it says I can still apply for the $600 a week. So are there any rules or more specifics on that?
No rules yet. Nope, they're still looking at that too.
Okay, so no age range either end?
No.
Okay. I think we answered those questions. And I think we answered the restaurant ones and how to report it. So I have a couple questions for Greg. Are you still there, Greg?
Yes, I'm here. I was on mute. Sorry.
Okay. For the payroll protection, is there a cap on the amount that the owner or the sole proprietor can draw off the company, or that's going to be based on what they did last year?
Salary limitation is $100,000 per employee.
Okay, but if you only drew 20,000 last year, can you draw 100,000 this year
No,
towards the loan?
no.
So it's based on the same amount that you took out of your
You're
company.
going to look at what you did last year. You can't. Well, I was jumping ahead. You can't get more forgiveness than the amount of the loan, and they're going to look at the 12-month period from last year. So if you were in business all of last year, they're going to look at your 2019 information, and that's the basis. It's the average of those months. That's the basis for determining how much you get. It's 2.5 times that average.
Okay, so I'm an independent contractor. I paint houses. Nobody wants me in their house, so I'm laying myself off. I will be able to collect when this whole $600 thing comes into play. I'll be able to collect that each week until we are able to open up the economy and people can go back out and see each other again. And at that point in time, my business will start up. So I will be able to use my quote unquote wage from that point on as a match for the PPP.
Again, they're going to look at what did you do in 2019? It's the average of those 12 months.
Okay.
Your unemployment is separate from that. They're looking at what you did with the business.
Okay. I think some of these were answered. We don't know about how long from the application for the EIDL grant/loan until we hear from a loan officer.
They're saying 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay. The updated list of lenders for the PPP program. So just to clarify, if you're doing the EIDL, that goes through the website and SBA. If you're applying for the PPP, those applications have to be completed and you have to work with a bank or a lender in order to do that. It's not an online process.
That is correct.
And so you should go to a banker that you currently have a relationship with.
Absolutely. That's where you should start. Start with your existing bank because you have a relationship with them. Some banks are saying that they're going to work first with their existing customers. That's the way it stands now. So start there. If your bank is not an SBA lender, then you can refer to that list.
Okay, and they will be able to theoretically start the application process with them on
Tomorrow.
tomorrow. That is for small businesses and nonprofits.
Small businesses, what I read was small businesses, nonprofits, and sole proprietors is what I read.
Okay, then who can apply, start on the 10th?
Let's see.
Or is that still sketchy?
Well, I had something on that on another computer, which I have to go to.
Okay. Well, you know, it doesn't hurt. When in doubt, apply on the 3rd. So I contacted most of the banks in our region about this and what their process is. And just to let you all know, what most of them are saying is, if you don't have an account anywhere with any of the lenders, you should go open an account. Call and make an appointment and open an account so you become a customer of the lending institution. And then what you will need to do is call again to the branch. They will connect you to the right person and make an appointment to apply for the loan. So you will need to make a one-on-one appointment with a loan officer in the bank. So you will not, and this is very important, you will not be able to just walk into a bank and hand them paperwork. You will need to make an appointment with each of your lending institutions. And that can either be made by calling the branch. Some of them are doing emails, but you'll need to call and make an appointment. So this isn't just like everybody on the 3rd can submit an application to a bank. You need to do it one-on-one with somebody at the bank.
All right, and the 1099 folks can apply on the 10th.
Okay, the independent contractors.
The independent contractors and self-employed individuals.
Okay, so the,
that's one of those that's probably a moving target. That's not etched in stone.
and of course there's questions that if you are self-employed and you own your own company and you are an independent contractor for other companies, let's say I'm a bookkeeper, I have my own business. Most of my revenue comes from 5 companies I do bookkeeping for, and I'm a 1099 for each of those. When do I get to apply? On the 3rd as a sole proprietor, or on the 10th as a 1099er?
Again, that's a moving target. I think I need to know more specifics, but the 1099 part sounds like the 10th. The other business, I don't know.
Okay, so the answer I was hoping you would say was that you need to call Greg on this, because some of these things are a little iffy. There's what we call gray area, so you want to be able to sit down with you specifically and look at how things are done so you can give them the best advice, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Some of this stuff is going to need to be researched, and again, a lot of it is changing, and what may be true today may not be true next week.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question, Terry. It's kind of a reverse shared work experience. So if an employer is planning and they're going to lay off some of their employees, or they're going to take them from 40 to 20 hours, they apply for the program, and then those employees can be laid off and collect half of their salary from unemployment and half from the employer. But what if the employer didn't know about this program and they just drastically cut hours, like let's say at a pizza place, and so they went from 40 hours with tips to 10 hours without tips? Can they still apply for unemployment even though they haven't gotten those instructions from their boss?
Well, the individuals, they can file their own unemployment, and that would be on the www.filectui.com.
Mm-hmm.
And they would state that they're still employed, and then each week that they have to file for unemployment, they must say, yes, they worked, report how many hours they worked, and then what they grossed, including tips. And then 2/3 of that amount, of the amount they report, will be deducted from their unemployment amount, and then they would get the remainder.
Okay. And so, Greg, along those lines, if we're looking at expenses for the PPP and I'm bringing back my wait staff, how do I calculate tips?
I don't have an answer for that. I'll have to look that up. I'm not exactly sure.
I don't think the government is either. I'm looking at our chat over here. Does anybody have any other questions that I haven't hit? The big problem that I see with the PPP is just an observer is the origination date for the loan. So if I get this loan before my business opens, my clock is running to be able to use my expenses towards my match. So we need to really figure out how that's going to work, because it would not be in my best interest to take that loan/grant until I was open back up and running and I could get my employees to come back to work. Do you agree with that assessment?
Completely. We'll need to get clarification on that. And again, I suspect it's one of those things that's going to need to be reviewed at the national level.
Yeah, because you want to maximize your forgiveness. Again, just to clarify, a business can apply for both the EIDL emergency loan and the PPP. They just can't use the same expenses for both.
Exactly.
Does that make sense to everybody, I hope? Let me just look at our questions again real quick. I am confused about is, do we apply for the loan or will there be a part just for the grant? I'm assuming that that is for the EIDL.
Yeah, if all you're interested in is the grant, just do the application and you'll still be eligible for it. You don't, let me stress, you don't have to take the money. Even if you're approved, you're not required to take it. There have been cases where, let's say, Diane told me of one where someone were offered more than they wanted. You can take a reduced amount. So you're not required to take this money.
Right. Someone applied for the EIDL, one of the people we were working with, hoping to get, $20,000 or $30,000, and they were offered $160,000, which was actually more than half of their entire gross revenue for the previous year. They were shocked, and they could take that $160,000 without a personal guarantee. So the moral of the story there is the SBA for the EIDL grants/loan. The SBA will determine how much you're eligible for. You're not applying for a particular amount. They will look at your revenues and expenses and they will determine it for you, correct?
That is exactly right.
Okay. So another gentleman asked if I filled out the PPP, but there are no spaces for utilities and rents. I'm assuming this is done at a later time?
The PPP, again, that application shouldn't be out yet. That doesn't go into effect until tomorrow. And again, the banks have to figure out exactly how they want to handle this. And I know that they're still working on it. So apparently there are some sort of preliminary applications floating around. You can start, again, what you should be doing now is pulling together your records so that you can have everything ready once the application there is a final application available. So, I wouldn't worry about what you don't see on an application right now.
Right. There were some sample applications that were floating around. I think it's good to look at those to see what kind of information you're going to need to gather and put together for the actual official application. But you won't get those applications till you make that appointment with your bank to sit down and apply. Your bank, when you call for that appointment, may email you or send you the official application that will be used, so you will have that in advance to your meeting. But that application really should come from your lending institution. Would you say that's correct, Greg?
I would indeed say that's correct.
Okay, another person says, I'm going to apply for the Paycheck Protection Loan, and what happens if when I go to open my business and I get this loan, my employee resigns or will not come back to work?
That's at least partially a Terry question. For PPP purposes, just keep documentation that you offered the job and the employee refused it. Obviously, at that point, you need to hire someone else. And again, if we're looking at, it's not the person, we're looking at FTEs, full-time equivalents. So you need a body. So find somebody else to fill the position. And I know that's easier said than done.
Yeah, that is something to be cautious about, because if you think that you're going to have a hard time getting your employees back, especially if they're minimum wage with the whole $600 thing, you need to be very careful about this, because you will not be able to necessarily match your loan like you thought you would. And so therefore you may end up having a loan versus a grant.
Well, again, you can get partial forgiveness. You may not get 100% forgiveness, but you can get partial forgiveness. So don't shy away from it just because that's a possibility.
Do you want to quickly, briefly describe how that reimbursement works?
Quickly, again, it's based on your bringing employees back and retaining them for, I think it's 8 consecutive weeks. It's into June. So it's 8 consecutive weeks. That's the key.
And that's based on bringing back the same number of full-time equivalents?
It's full-time equivalents. You can't count on bodies. It's, the same person necessarily. Obviously, they want you to try to reemploy people who you've laid off. That's their priority. But if for some reason they don't want to come back, or they find something else in the interim, it is based on full-time equivalents. So hire someone else.
Okay. And I mean, if you're below the full-time equivalents, you still can get reimbursed. It just won't be a 1-to-1 reimbursement. It would be maybe a 1 to 0.75.
Exactly.
For
Or
example.
0.9, or it just depends on what your situation ends up being.
Right. And again, if you bring back more people, you can actually match it at a higher rate than one-on-one.
I didn't get much sleep last night. You can't, let's see, you can't be forgiven for more than you borrowed. I think that's what I want to say.
That's correct, but I think you can match it at a higher rate if you bring back more employees.
Yeah.
At least that was
Yes,
the last.
but you won't get more than you borrowed.
Is there any help for companies that keep all of their employees versus those that lay them off and then rehire them? Is there any difference?
Effectively, I don't think so.
It's the same.
Yeah, they want you to retain employees, but the thing is, this exists because some companies are literally forced to close. They don't have a choice. If you're fortunate enough to be able to continue to work because you're essential, that's great.
Another question, I called Berkshire Bank yesterday. They said to call back in 3 weeks because they had no information.
Berkshire said that? I'm surprised Berkshire said that. We had heard other information from Berkshire. You may need to find another lender. If they're saying 3 weeks, then look for another lender. Depending upon your situation. I mean, if there's no rush to apply for this, then wait the 3 weeks. But if you want to get this started right away, then find another lender.
I would say that's probably a good idea. So the SBA does have on their website an application. I just warn everybody, it's a great starting point, but the application that your lender gives you is going to be the final one. So we've already seen applications change within 24 hours. So I would just caution everyone, it's a great starting point. You can see what kind of information you're going to need that the SBA or your lender is looking for, but the final application is the one that your lender is going to hand you. If someone's unemployment ended in February, and can they now apply now instead of waiting to July? Can they collect early? So basically they've exhausted, I think this is what it's saying, they've exhausted their unemployment benefit, let's say in February. Are they able to reapply now under the CARES Act and collect again?
Well, right now, if someone has exhausted their benefits, there are no extensions. And again, that's why I'm advising everyone to continue to watch our website for updates if there is an extension and how to apply for that.
So someone asked about banks in the Wyndham area. I can say that I was on the phone with KeyBank and People's Bank. They know about this. They are still all working. Like I said, SBA just came out with these not even a few hours ago. And again, they're still making some adjustments. And the banks have to figure out how to work it within their own system. And they have to have enough employees because they're all expecting a huge amount of people applying for this. So they, at least those two banks confirmed that they're gearing up for this process, and they're the ones who said you've got to call, make an appointment, and they'll start on Friday to make those appointments to sit down and work through the application with you. Is there any special benefit to keeping all my employees versus laying them off and then rehiring them?
Not for unemployment.
Okay. How do you come up with the lost rent amount if we don't know how long this will last? Greg, do you have any idea?
Yeah, there was, I'd have to have them call me and I'll sort that out. I think we have an answer to that. It's based, they're not really looking at, well, you're going to look at your average from last year, probably. Just look at your average income from last year, your average expenses, and just base it on that. I don't know if there's anything else you could do, because again, there's no way to know how long this will last. And I'm the one who said we need to look at what happened in 1918 to get a sense of how long this could go on.
Okay, and someone also commented that their bank lender just said that an appointment is not necessary. Like I said, I spoke to People's Bank, KeyBank, and Webster Bank, and they all said because of the coronavirus, they are taking precautions. They do not want everybody coming into the bank. They don't want you to just go there and have 30 people in the lobby. They want you to call and make an appointment so that they can keep, people from congregating and spreading the virus. So I'm not sure, Kathleen, who your bank was, but that was the advice I got from those 3 local banks. Again, doesn't hurt to call them and check with them ahead of time. So here's an interesting question. When calculating the payroll for the PPP, are your 1099 employees included? So I've answered this question myself a couple times today, but I'll let you all talk about 1099 employees.
They're either employees or they're 1099 subcontractors. You can't be both. You're not an employee if you're a 1099. That's a legitimate expense, but that's not an employee.
Okay. So I hope everybody understands that. Another question is, if you're still working and you've never laid yourself or them off, you can still apply for the PPP to help pay their salaries during this time, right? It does not require you to have been shut down or for you to have laid people off for you to apply for the PPP and be able to use those dollars to cover your costs. Yes or no?
I don't know. And in fact, I was just thinking about that question before we got on the call because that issue came up with someone else. And I need to get an answer to that.
Okay.
So whoever asked that question, please get in touch with me because I have to find an answer.
Yeah, I think what I had heard from Congressman Courtney and something else was that you have to show that the coronavirus has affected your business in some way. So if you're able to still continue to work, you still need to have a negative impact on your business in order to apply for any of these things. If your company is going along and is doing better than it was before or just the same, then you haven't been impacted, so you shouldn't be able to apply for these.
That is my understanding as well. However, I need to find that in writing so I can hand you something that says it, that's definitive. Okay.
So as far as I can see, that's all the questions. If anybody has any more, they're welcome to send them in the chat or here's another one, sorry. If I am a sole proprietor who recently established an LLC, December of 2019, but was functioning as a DBA previously, what will be used to establish the unemployment amount granted?
I'm sorry, was that question? Could you repeat that question if it was
No, it
me?
says if I was a sole proprietor, I was a sole proprietor previous to December, and then I established myself as an LLC. What will be used to establish the unemployment amount that they're granted?
Well, for unemployment, if they have employees, they have to report the wages every quarter to us. So they should have been doing that no matter what their circumstances are. If they're talking about themselves, the owner of the business, the officer of the business, if they don't report their earnings to the Department of Labor and pay taxes on them, they would not be eligible themselves for regular unemployment, and they would have to watch for information on self-employment, business owners, sole proprietor.
Okay. So one of the things that we've been telling employers when they lay people off was to be we were very specific to make sure that you furlough them and that you're giving them a return to date work. So some people gave their employees a return to date work of April 1st, thinking that this was going to all blow over. If that date has come and passed, do those employees need to refile, or they just continue to file every week?
No.
Go about.
Okay, so what happens with that April 1st, because that was on our website, we have it so that our system should remove that date by Saturday, and each employee that used that date will receive an email telling them exactly what they need to do. So they should be looking for an email.
Okay, and that email will give them, those employees, instructions on what to do.
Correct.
The employer does not have to do anything.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm going back to the gentleman who said he was a DBA up until December, and now he's a sole proprietor. This is his first quarter, obviously January through March, as an LLC. He has not reported his earnings yet. So should he do that? And then how will that affect any unemployment he might receive?
Well, the first quarter is due by April 30th. So this employer is registered with the Department of Labor. We're talking Department of Labor, not Revenue.
I'm assuming he's talking about that. So he's now,
a lot of them,
he's now an LLC. So his first quarter's gone by. He should report his own earnings to the Department of Labor if he wants to be eligible for unemployment. He hasn't done that yet. So I guess he's asking, should he do that? And
well,
that
the first quarter, they can file again, but it sounds like if he's the only employee of this company, he's not registered with the Department of Labor.
So he still will not be eligible until the $600 kicks in.
Again, I don't even know about the $600. So if he has no wages in 2019 that has been reported to the Department of Labor, he would not be eligible for the regular unemployment benefits, and we have no information on the $600.
Okay, so I got another answer from him. He says he has 3 employees. So I'm assuming that he hasn't filed with Department of Labor his company earnings or their payroll yet. So are they eligible to claim, his employees, are they eligible to claim unemployment? He hasn't had a
Well, we'll be looking at his employees' earnings from 2019. So if he didn't employ them, maybe they work for someone else, and if they have earnings from someone else, then they could file unemployment and possibly receive regular unemployment.
Okay, so I'm going to say, Nick, you probably should, if you're still listening, you probably should give Ms. Kowalski a call to make sure that she's answering your question appropriately, or an email. One other question that just came in. Airbnb pays Connecticut taxes directly to the state. As a host who relies on hosting as their main income, and of which is now down to 0, I imagine, can I get unemployment benefits?
Again, sorry, I have to ask. I know they're saying they're registered, but most of the time when employers like this, they're registered with Department of Revenue and pay their taxes.
Mhm.
This is the Department of Labor.
Thank
So
you.
that is the question. Are they registered with the Department of Labor?
And it's easy enough to check by calling the Department of Labor if they need to. The taxes that Airbnb pays, I am assuming, are sales tax or entertainment tax, hotel tax. So that's
Right, that's not with
Department
us.
of Labor.
Right, no.
Okay. So again, anyone that has a question for Terry can give her a call at 860-263-6706. It's at the beginning of the chat. Webinar information, both contacts for Greg and Terry are there. And if you have any interesting, and if you're a nonprofit, we didn't really answer that question, Greg. We sort of came back to it. So nonprofits, almost all of them can apply for the EIDL grants. Is that correct?
Yeah, religious organizations can't, and lobbying organizations can't. I think there was one more.
Gambling.
These are nonprofits. I don't know if there are any nonprofit gambling institutions, but yeah, let's see. Again, I'll look into that. Ideally, you'll call me and I'll look into the specifics of your situation.
And the easy thing is they go and start the application. The first page is, are you this, are you that, are you this?
Yes.
And to differentiate the difference between a public and private nonprofit.
Okay. The majority of if you're a public not-for-profit, the majority of the revenue that you take in or your donations or whatever come from public institutions like state programs, that kind of thing. It's private if the majority of your funds come from foundations or public donations, as opposed private donations from the public. This does get confusing. Donations from the public, foundations, that kind of thing, then you can be considered a private nonprofit. You're a public nonprofit when most of your money, let's say, comes from government institutions. You're getting public monies, money that comes from taxpayer funding. If that's the case, then you're not eligible.
That's for the EIDL. The PPP program?
Same thing. You're public nonprofits are not eligible for either program, as I understand it right now.
Right. But only 501c3s and 501c19 veteran groups are eligible for the PPP. Is that correct?
What I went through there said that was the case. But again, I'm happy to look at this on a case-by-case basis. For instance, museums generally are eligible. It's that public-private distinction that's important.
Okay, and so when in doubt, they should give you a call, because some people are commenting that most nonprofits have both public and private. I think
it's where the majority of the money comes from.
Right. Is there any official classification, like from the IRS?
Yeah, you do. When you fill out, even nonprofits do a tax return at the end of the year. In the tax return, you're going to show where your money comes from, and it's again, it should be fairly clear if most of your money comes from, again, public governmental entities versus foundations and donations from the general public. You should make that distinction.
Okay, an employer said that their employee is being asked by the Department of Labor for copies of her pay stubs and W-2. Shouldn't they already have this information?
Well, we have the wages, so there must be a specific reason that this individual is being asked that. They may have filed before and they may have been denied, and we're just trying to see if we can close out that denial. But there's got to be something more to this. We just don't arbitrarily ask for W-2s or wages.
Okay. So at this point, oh, that person came back and said it's the first time she has filed. I think that, again, why don't you give Terry a call? Maybe she can answer that for you, unless you have any advice for her, Terry?
No, because I would need to see, I mean, the application is asking for wages, but that should have been given by the employer to them in the separation packet.
Okay. So
So
those
did the
are,
employer give that employee a separation packet with the information?
Terry's phone number, in case anybody wants to call and ask questions, is 860-263-6706. If you scroll all the way to the top of the chat, contact information for Terry and Greg are there. If you have any other questions or need to reach them, you can always email the chamber at info@wyndhamchamber.com, and we can send you in the correct direction. I think, so Nancy, a lady named Nancy, is the one who is asking the questions about her employee. I think you two should probably catch up with each other and work through that. Okay, so I think we've gone through all of the questions. Do you want to do any summary, Terry or Greg?
I think I'm done.
The only thing I can do is say that please ask your employees to be patient if they submitted their application. We are working as hard and as diligently as we can to process these. And again, if anybody has a specific question, it'd probably be easier if they can just send it to my email, then I can look it right up immediately and respond to you. If I do have a question or I'm not quite understanding what you're asking, if you could just leave you may be working from home, so leave a phone number that I can reach you at, because I'm sometimes at home as well, so we could do it through cell phones. But thank you very much for including me in this webinar, and I hope I've answered most of your questions anyway.
I really appreciate you coming. You were brave, because I'll say we have a huge amount of businesses that have been calling, panicking over the $600 thing, because their employees are saying, you got to lay me off. I'm quitting. I'm not coming back. They're looking at that being potentially out to 10 months, which is through the spring and summer. And I suppose if I could sit at home on the beach during the summer and make more money than I did working, I might think that that's a good idea too. So
right.
I appreciate you looking.
So by all means, if the employers receive the notices of potential liability saying you're liable, please complete that document, check the appropriate box, sign it, and get it right back to us.
That's great advice. And then I'm going to part by saying again, Greg with the Small Business Development Center has been on top of everything. When all of this is over, he has an office at the Chamber of Commerce, can meet with you there, which is very convenient. Anyone that has questions or a unique businesses or situations should definitely contact him. His information again is at the top of the chat bar. He's also on our website. The Chamber has been putting out at least 1 or 2 blasts a day with all of the updated information between the governor's executive orders or changes in process. You can access all of that on our website. And we have copies there of individual electronic newsletters with the information. So please feel free to access that. I mean, everybody at this point is throwing information out at you, so I don't want to overwhelm you. It's been a pretty good thing. And one last final words, other than thanking our guest speakers and Steve for hosting this, is if you are a business or a nonprofit, you really should apply for the EIDL. There's absolutely nothing bad in that for you. That could be potentially a good $10,000 operating funds for you to get through this crisis. So if you have any questions, make sure you give us a call on that. Okay, so again, thank everybody. Tomorrow we have another podcast at 10 o'clock with Congressman Courtney. If you're interested in hearing or talking to him or asking him questions, there is a question and answer period. So you can join us tomorrow at 10 o'clock. The registration link information is on our website, which is wyndhamchamber.com. You can get that and hook up for that conference too. Okay, thank you all again for coming. I appreciate it. And everybody stay healthy, stay safe, hopefully very profitable in a month from now. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.